Yeah, it works. All right. Yay.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2015 Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show. I'm Dave Okert. My counterpart is David Shoemaker. I go by Doc and this is David. And we've had quite a few requests about multiple arcade, and we've had a lot of requests about MAME. And MAME is Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator.
Yep.
We're not going to cover MAME at all.
Well, not true.
Well,
I will do 30 seconds worth.
Go ahead.
MAME. It's the ability to run arcade ROMs on your home computer. That can give you an interesting experience, which may or may not be accurate. One nice thing is you think, oh, well, how am I going to do this fancy, 6 buttons and the joystick on my home computer? That is what this kind of thing would do for you. This is arcade controls on a plexiglass unit using what's called an iPack, which is a USB to controller interface. That is how you could handle that. So it is a possibility, but we're not going to go into it a whole much more beyond that. We're going to go into the X-in-1s, which are arcade systems running effectively a small splinter version of MAME on a PC chip on these things.
The big reason that we're not going to go into we're not going to go into MAME is that for the most part MAME is illegal. To own an emulator is perfectly legal, but you need to buy the ROMs. We cannot tell you where to get the ROMs. We will not tell you where to get the ROMs. The legalities are very frustrating. These triple X-in-1 or X-in-1, as we call them, they're not legal either. However, nobody's going to beat down your door and take you off to jail because you own one of these things. We understand that not everybody has a room for a collection such as David or I have. And they'd like to have as many games as they can in a small space. And that's where the X-in-1 comes into play.
So, as we said, there's a huge variety of these. You can find these eBay, Amazon. Type in 160-in-1 into your favorite search engine, and you will get lots and lots of different listings. They all do effectively the same thing, in that they provide a board, a JAMA connector, Japanese Machine Manufacturers Association. That's the standard connector for any arcade game made after 90-ish. You'll get a variety of different versions. That's why we call them an X-in-1. They started out with 32-in-1s, 16-in-1s, they're up to 60-in-1s, 160-in-1s, 348-in-1s, 512-in-1s, blah, 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 blah. The biggest differentiator between these is the orientation of your monitor. You have vertical or portrait. You have horizontal and landscape. You'll note this is going to be a little bit harder to play like this. So depending on how you want to use it, you need to make sure you're putting it in a cabinet that either has a rotatable monitor or you're doing it, as we are, on a bench, on a table, whatever, using an arcade power supply, an arcade harness, the board, a controller. I bought these at Radio Shack. They were Sega Master System, blah, blah, whatevers, many, many years ago, and a standard PC monitor. One nice thing about an X-in-1, it has a VGA adapter. Makes it very convenient to hook up to any PC monitor, and in fact, most TVs. If you are putting it into a real live arcade machine, you would not use this connector, and the video would feed out through your normal JAMA connector. One thing you will note is the resolution that these things put out is not optimal for your monitor. So depending on your monitor, it may give you a bit of a whine about please convert your whatever to the right resolution. If that message doesn't go away or you get a blank screen, you need a different monitor. This one whines at me for 30 seconds, and then it goes away and just behaves. So this, also known as a blue elf, this is a horizontal X and 1. Games are set up this way. The one I'm running here, 160 and 1, it's for vertical. This comes down, you want to play Miss Pac-Man, you're going to want a system that does this. If you want to play Defender,
scrolling fighters,
you're going to want this. So it really depends on what game you want. If you really love Bubble Bobble, you're going to get this and then be extremely disappointed. One thing to note with all of these are emulations. The quality of an emulation can vary hugely. It's like the favorite remake of that movie you loved when you were a kid and they came out and destroyed it. Well, that's kind of what these are doing.
Red Dawn.
So this has Bubble Bobble on it. I love Bubble Bobble. I have Bubble Bobble hardware. I have the original stuff. I tried it on my machine, on my desktop, and you get about 10 bubbles on screen and everything starts to go like this and the music gets very strange and the bubbles start to do this until you pop them and it's all back to happy, enjoy you. If you really want to play the game or to relive a little bit of that, these will work, usually to an extent.
The other very large complaint about any of the emulators is that the sound is not emulated correctly. And it's very noticeable in a lot of your favorite classics. Donkey Kong is a big one. Galaga.
Yeah, anything that has symphonic-ish sound, you're going to notice it. If it's bleeps and bloops, you won't notice it as much. Yeah. If you're playing Mario Brothers, the hop is going to sound fine, but the background music's going to be a little off. And you're going to think, wait, am I just misremembering it? No, you're not. It's just not quite right. They've sampled it, they put it into a loop. They're not using the original generation of these nice audio waveforms. It's an emulation.
Frogger is really, really bad. Just a brief history. Between David and I, we have over 60 years worth of experience of collecting, repairing, and restoring arcade video games and pinball machines. And in most circles, we're considered purists. And what that means is that we, if at all possible, will run everything on original hardware, vice something like this, because it's pure. What a lot of people don't realize is that the original games, for example, Miss Pac-Man, was 320 dots per inch by 240 dots per inch interlaced on the screen. So for every pixel, it was like a plus sign with 4 dots. And that's the way it was drawn. When you look at it on one of these, it's no longer interlaced, and it kind of all mushes together. And so the picture is not true to what you would normally see on an old arcade machine.
Or you can, one thing, it's too sharp.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It looks too good, which makes it look bad. The actual tube, the phosphors, the way they would kind of blend across pixels, and it would give you a little bit more of a smooth edge and look a bit different.
It also, because it's so sharp, it makes things blocky. And if you look, for example, on Miss Pac-Man, if you look at the ghosts and the bottom of the ghosts, they're extremely blocky, whereas if you were looking at it on an actual arcade monitor, they're real nice and sharp, and the bottom of their tails kind of wave like it's supposed to be. On these, it's very blocky and kind of choppy. But again, if you don't have a lot of space and you would like to have more than just one game.
So we've got, Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Frogger, Donkey Kong 3, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong in that much space versus, half that wall. Those are those of us who are perfectly happy to put half a wall or 7 Connex boxes full of games on there. Yeah. But if you don't have it, you one-room apartment, or you've only got a 3-car garage, you may have to make some concessions.
So let's get down to brass tacks. How do we build one of these? What do we need?
Okay, so an arcade cabinet with a JAMA interface. That's your first step. Or, as I said, you can go to the science fair if you wish. You're going to want 2 buttons.
3.
Or,
Minimum 3.
well, it depends on the game. You don't need 3 for Donkey Kong.
No, you need 3 because you need the setup button.
Yeah, the setup button.
Have 3.
Okay,
Minimum
so
3.
2 joysticks, 3 buttons per joystick, plus start buttons 1 and 2. That's your minimum control panel layout.
I'm sorry, hang on a sec. I kind of confused you there. You only need, for player controls, you need 2 buttons. You need a total of 3 buttons in order to access the menus. So you would have like a start button, or I'm sorry, a fire button, a bomb button, and a test button.
Yeah.
So it's, and some of these you can have 3 per side. You can have 6 per side. Again, it depends on the game.
Another thing that is common in these is having trackball interface also. So you wanted to play Missile Command, it's possible, hooking up through these headers here for a 2-player trackball. I've never actually done it. I don't know how effective it is. Purists, sorry.
Are most trackballs the same interface-wise, like between Missile Command and Golden Tee?
Yes. Yes.
If they are HAP replacement, if you can use a HAP controller as a replacement, yes, it's the same. There was a Betson that reversed a wire.
Yes.
But in the manual, it tells you this is the layout. If you go up and the ball goes down, you got to wire backwards. It's fairly straightforward. The important part is the ground wire and the +5 wire. The clocking wires aren't as big a deal. You can figure that out. Making sure your +5 and your ground are good, so you're not trying to drop +5 into one of the optos where it doesn't belong.
Generally speaking, if you see out on either Amazon or eBay or wherever a trackball that runs $29.99, don't buy it. It will work. It's just that's where you're going to have your problems. The nice HAP replacement trackballs that are the 2 1/4 for Centipede and that nature. They used to run about $80, but the price has come down on them, and they're right around 40-ish now. Pay the extra $10, buy the quality trackball.
But they can be scavenged from all those other games too.
Oh,
Yeah,
certainly.
if you've got a box full of Centipede parts, you could use that.
If you have a 4-inch trackball out of a Missile Command,
Or Golden Tee is the one I see all the time, right? Parts
Yeah,
of that are all-
and that is a HAP, that is a generic HAP trackball, no problem, easy to use.
And that would go into an iPack also?
Well, an iPack is going to be a little different. Those are going to be running USB usually. So if you're running a true MAME system, you're going to use a USB trackball. And those are going to be PC, and you'll be finding specific hardware for that. Or an adapter.
don't they also adapt them to PS2s?
Depending on the unit.
They can work. You're going to have to adapt it.
Yeah.
So
You're going a little far
sure.
afield from the general straight line. Doable, but a little more work. Okay, so you have your cabinet. We'll assume that you're going with the cabinet. And you, once again, check your portrait versus landscape, vertical versus horizontal. Depending on what game you want, you're going to really want to make sure you get the right orientation, because it's playable like this, but your neck gets sore after a while. The right number of controls, the test switch, coin switches, and those things, you can use them, but most people don't in the home. It doesn't really matter. Then you get the appropriate unit that has the games on it you want. In general, you're only going to get the games that come with it. You're not going to be able to replace them later. And depending on which unit you get, it may have different games. There's kind of a core set of games. You're going to usually find a pack of some nature. You're going to find a DK of some nature, and so on. but you want to make sure that that game you really wanted to play is on the board you buy. Now you take that empty cabinet or whatever board was in it, you can remove that. This plugs in, pretty straightforward. As I said, if you're using an existing cabinet, there's going to be a dip switch on it. Look in your manual. These will be fairly low quality manuals. Somebody tried very hard. Somebody tried to get you reasonable, but it's going to be, there'll be a setting for VGA, or well, your display mode. CGA, VGA, that's relating to this. Some of them will say internal and external. That's talking about the stuff the video coming through here or the video coming out here. You may have to play with the settings depending on which board to get your video out. If you're using like a PC monitor, there's a headphone jack. You run it out to some powered speakers, you got your noise. If you're running it through an existing cabinet, your audio will come through your JAMA connector. I went this route, I didn't bring any speakers, that's why I don't have any noise.
Does the JAMA connection only support low-res CRTs? Or
JAMA, it is only going to support standard CGA or low-res game output. If you want to run the higher resolution, you're going to have to go to a VGA monitor.
I mean, you have to be picky about the cabinet you choose, right? Because some of those come with medium res.
Yes, and it's not going to put out the right signal for that.
Yeah, what you'll end up with is you'll end up with 3 pictures. If you have a medium res cabinet and you put one of these in, you'll be looking at 3 pictures on top of each other, and it'll be sliced in thirds. And it's kind of funny. We've seen quite a few people do it, and they go, I don't know what's wrong. Well, you have a medium resolution monitor, and you're putting standard resolution picture into it.
Yeah. It is not an uncommon thing for people to go, ooh, too bad, something went wrong. Okay, out of there, put something like this in the cabinet. That works pretty well if you're running one of these. It doesn't work so well if you're running original Pac-Man hardware. Doable, that's another seminar.
Okay. What we've got behind me over here, I stole this from Bob Roberts. And Bob Roberts he used to be a distributor in Louisiana. And since he retired, he has become a parts supplier for parts supplier for the entire arcade collecting community. And he works more now as a parts supplier than he ever did as a distributor. And it's just him and his wife and his grandkids, and they just send parts everywhere. Great place for a lot of information. And the reason that I stole this from Bob Roberts is because he has color-coded all of the JAMA connections, and it's very easy to see and tell what goes where. And when you buy a JAMA harness, you can buy a JAMA harness for $9. When you buy it for $9,
it's going to be a whole spaghetti of wires.
Bunch of
it will not have these ends on it. I have added those for my test bench.
When you pay $35 for a JAMA harness, then it'll be somewhat separated into this type of setup, so it's much easier to follow for somebody that's new in it.
Now, one gotcha, depending on your board, you're going to want to look. So in the manual, in this manual, it has this diagram again. You'll note, depending on the board, you see, one thing to note is this goes buttons 1 through 5. You will notice this has 6 buttons. Some boards take over this last row, this ground line, and make it button 6. That's going to be a problem in your wiring harness, depending on how they wired it up. This Blue Elf does exactly that. And will confuse the bejesus out of you why things aren't working. None of my controls work. Well, because you probably most operators will grab these to run up the control panel. And if that's one of your button inputs, well, suddenly you don't have the ground to the controls and the controls don't work. So you need to verify what you're seeing, depending on which unit.
That's one of the things that we tested before we started this seminar today. And the 60-in-1 that is currently runs fine. The controls work fine. As soon as we plug in the Blue Elf, because of that error in the end of it, the only thing that'll come up is the test screen. And we can't get out of it because we have no control, and it's one wire. That's all it is, one wire.
Per control, but it's let's see. So these have a old PC style power adapter on them. You can use that, and the JAMA connector for your controls and avoid all your power. If you hook this up, you better make sure that your JAMA end doesn't run power in also, or you could end up with a problem. I've never actually seen anybody use this. I don't know quite what they're putting them on there for. Somebody must have been using them, but I see everybody just run power through the JAMA.
Is it power out if you plug in the JAMA to that?
No, because it's on the other side of a regulator.
Okay.
So I would not try that.
Nope.
Let's see. If your favorite game is Area 51, you're not going to find one of these that'll do it for you. No gun game support in general. I don't think I've ever seen any of them that did, any 16 or any X and one that did a gun game. Optical guns have different kind of hardware requirements, so a little bit more problematic.
If one of your favorite games in the group that you're looking for are Williams classics, do not, and I repeat, do not buy the 19-in-1. It is the biggest dog turd available. But it's currently the only one that that is in the X-in-1 family that runs the Williams classics. J-Rock, who is a guy by the name of James down in San Diego, made a Williams multi-game that is a JAMA setup, and that one actually emulates all of the original Williams hardware correctly. Sounds, video, the whole 9 yards. It's beautiful. They run about, I think they're $175 if you can find them, and they're a great board.
The game elf, the blue elf, the something elf. It's all.
Yeah. Now, when you get to a 2018 N1, that's actually about this big. It's about the size of a motherboard, and it's a sandwich pack. It's usually got a hard drive on it. Not always, usually.
My controls don't want to work on this one.
And
because of the wiring problem.
Those only run a couple $100, you know, for 2000. And one of the things that, you know, we said we weren't going to talk about MAME, but well, if you were to build a MAME unit, you can actually get, I think the library is now a little over 7,000 games that you can put on your PC.
Let's see, which one of these was also horizontal? Want to work. And this is really, you know, two connectors to swap one of these out. Because I'm running the monitor. If it was just running through the JAMA cabinet, it'd be one. Don't do it with the power on. Not a good thing.
Another interesting, fun thing that we find all the time is that in the Pacific Northwest, the 60-in-1 is commonly sold as a brand new unit, a lot of times in a cocktail version. And they sell for anywhere from $1,200 to $2,600. For you to actually build it, you'd be into it about $300.
This is talking about the resolution complaint. It doesn't like this board.
But here in the Pac Northwest, we're extremely lucky. On the East Coast, that same unit goes for up to $4,000.
5 minutes.
We'll go ahead and take any other questions, if we have questions coming in online that you were asking about as well, or if anybody has anything else. Let's run with it. If not, feel free to come on up and take a look at any of this stuff.
You had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I've built probably 80 of the 60-in-1 games, and if you're gonna build one of those, it's probably better to go with the flat panel monitor because you're dealing with 60 games, and if you're using an old monitor that has Pac-Man burn, it's not gonna look good when you're playing Gallagher or Donkey Kong.
Is there a cabinet that
that you've seen that translates best to doing this with?
Well, there is, but we're kind of, like I said, we're purists, and so we're kind of against it.
So, okay, so any JAMA cabinet should work fine. Any JAMA cabinet probably had crap in it in the first place, so I don't really care about it that much.
Basically, what I was getting at is if you destroy a Pac-Man or a Miss Pac-Man, I'm whooping somebody's ass.
We're going to hunt you down.
But those are technically the best.
But those are not JAMA cabinets.
Right.
They're going to be dedicated wiring. You're going to be going in and replacing a bunch of stuff. If you're looking for straight JAMA, what are known as dynamo cabinets, it was a company that manufactured cabinets for the arcade industry. They're pretty good. Now, they're usually 25-inch. They've got a slide-out control panel. They have a rotatable monitor. It's not a one-person job to rotate the monitor, but it is doable.
The angle of your monitor will also be similar to this. And for best playability, if you actually angle it back a little bit, that is the most visually appealing to the majority of people, and that's why they did it that way back then.
Yeah. Let's see which one's this. Horizontal, vertical, yeah. If you want to come up and touch
so
and
like
feel
I say, feel free, come on up and take a look at these. This is what we've got for you as far as Multicade. And
there is one thing, most of them have cocktail mode available. So if you want to put them in a cocktail cabinet where you're going to be switching sides, that's viable. It's usually a dip switch setting or a software setting, depending on the particular board.
Most of them, it's a dip switch setting. And there's only 4 dip switches on this thing.
Well,
on the majority of them, there's 4 dip switches. You know, one's going to get you into test mode. One's going to change you from CGA to VGA for video, and then one will go cocktail or upright. The other one is usually, honestly, not used.
I got a screen. Yay!
Did you get out of it?
I got it. Yeah, CGA versus VGA.
Ah, wow! We actually got it to boot.
It's now 2:30 p.m. Just letting you know.
Okay.
Okay, so pretty much with that, we're going to conclude this and move on, and we'll take a couple of minutes and shift a couple of things over.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
What's next?
GI, I think. Remember it?
Are these blue elves compatible with VGA as well?
Shining light.
Okay, go ahead.
Outstanding. Okay. What we're going to cover in this next
Introduce
segment.
yourself, sir.
What?
Introduce yourself.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead? You do the introduction this time.
Okay. Welcome. My name is David Shoemaker. This is Doc Okert. We, between us, have way too many years of experience working on this kind of stuff. 30 plus-ish, with a combined collection over 200 pieces of pinball and video. We're going to show you a bit about lamp matrix.
We're gonna discuss general illumination versus feature lamps.
Versus feature lamp.
First,
So,
yeah.
okay.
And we've got a couple of different static pieces. This static piece is a pinbot that was loaned to us specifically for this. The other thing that we have is we have a lamps diagram out of a Bad Cats. Slightly different animals, both System 11. Really doesn't matter. The majority of pinball lamps are the same. There's a very few small nuances that are different in between machines and manufacturers. One of the biggest problems that we get is when we get phone calls for repair and people say, my lamps don't work. And they can't tell me, your lamps don't work. And I go, oh, okay. Well, my cat doesn't like dog food. It means nothing. When I say, you know, are we talking feature lamps or are we talking GI?
GI stands for General Illumination.
I get, a lot of times I get dead phone or I get total silence, and you know, it's the same. And we did not boot up for some reason.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So, actually, well, we can use this as a point. Let's see, all these lamps are on. There's a variety in the playfield, usually under the edge of plastics, under pop bumpers, a few spots on the back glass. If the glass was on, you'd see it was the name and the machine and a few things like that. These are, in most cases, always on lamps. These are general illumination. They're illuminating parts of the playfield that don't tend to be under computer control. Now, they may flash occasionally because they've got a circuit that runs a relay that can turn on and off the general illumination. Now, if you get things like in the playfield, in this case there's a big matrix of lights. If it's things that light up when you make a shot, those are feature lamps. Those are controlled by a feature of the hardware. Now, normally when you boot a machine, you'll see all the GI comes on and an attract mode will start up. You'll start seeing various flashing things to attract people to come and play your game. We're noticing no flashy, which tells us something's gone wrong. Machine hasn't fully booted. We have other things that tell us that. These, don't touch those, there's high voltage there. That makes things, ouch. Yes, I've done it. He laughed at me.
We just didn't decide whether it was the plus 100 volts that got him or the negative 100 volts. Either way, he took it all.
All right. Now in this case, we're not going there. In this case, we can see we do not have the blanking running, so the system has not booted correctly. And now we have flashy lights.
Okay.
We have flashy lights.
I am so glad this is not my machine. Okay. Now we have our feature lamps.
No,
This is a combination of the relay that David was just talking about in the general illumination. That now when the general illumination flashes, it will flash them all because they're all tied in series. And the beings are all tied in series. That's the only thing they can do with general illumination. They can't hit one at a time or two at a time.
This,
or,
they're not going to do it. They're not going to do marquee styling because it's all one light as far as the computer's concerned.
Throughout the history of pinball, and this is from the inception of putting lamps, general illumination lamps in pinball, all the way up until the last couple of years, where folks like Stern and Jersey Jack Pinball have used LEDs for general illumination. Up until that point, every general illumination circuit was designed wrong. And when I say wrong, it was over amped. And the reason that, there's several reasons they did it. One, because they could put a lot of lights on a string and it looked really cool. And it was cheap. But the real reason is that if you ever looked at the manufacturer's warranty from back in the day, it was 90 days. You were expected to make your money on this $2,800 machine in 90 days. If it didn't live to 91, manufacturer didn't care. Okay, now that this is 30 years old and you've overamped this circuit for 30 years, your headers and connectors are going to burn up. One of the best things that any pinball owner can do of an older machine is to go to LEDs in general illumination, for one, but you also replace the connector and the header for the GI. If you just replace the connector and not the header, you'll get anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months, and it'll burn up again. And we've proven this on many different occasions.
Okay. Any questions at this point? You guys are quiet today.
So I have a Pharaoh,
Okay.
which has split GI,
Okay.
and they're both on relays. And I have one that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Okay.
So
Can you hear the relay clicking?
no. So,
Okay.
But I can go in and kind of mess with the wire. The wires all look okay. I can reseat them and it works okay.
Okay.
I don't know which end it is really.
I can
All right.
tell you which end that is. That's easy. And this is all very common in Williams. We work on a lot of Williams stuff. And Williams uses a lot of these little connectors right here, like this guy. And they're .062 connectors.
Molex branded.
Molex brand, yeah. And for example, we had a Black Knight that got brought to a repair party, and he had upper GI and no lower. And then after a few minutes, he had no upper GI. And he wiggled around, then he had lower GI but no upper. And what happens is that you've stressed those pins for 30 years. And the amperage draw is so high, and as it wears and ages, the amperage draw is actually getting higher than it was originally designed. So with your male pin and your female pin, right, as it heats up, a couple minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, the female expands. When it expands, now it's just like wiggling back and forth. So it may work and it may not work. My suggestion is to repin the connector where they connect together.
Okay. And that was
Yeah.
the piece that I actually tried to work on. I checked to see that the relay was working okay. That seemed to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it worked for a few hours and then stopped again.
Yeah, that's
And then once it stops, it stops. I turn it back
Right.
on and it stopped again, so it's not expanding away from it. Just-
when you turn it off and then turn it back on, it works again.
No, not immediately.
No,
Right,
it takes
that's
time.
because it takes time
to
for it to
cool
cool.
down, and as it cools down, it reseats.
Right, but I mean the next time I turn it on a week later, it still is off.
Oh, okay. So, real common problem with all of these is, these headers, if you actually go and read the manufacturer's specs on these headers,
The manufacturer of the header.
the header, it's going to say insertion cycles, and it's going to say a number like 30. That's how many times they expected that to last, pulled off and pushed back on. If you could find a machine anywhere that has been done less than 200 times, I'd be very surprised. Part of this is what's happening is that there's a tin plating over the contact, and then the pin is there, and they rub. So this is where you say, oh, I wiggled the connector and it worked. Like, because you broke the oxidation layer, and now you've got bare metal-ish, but you still got oxidation there. This is one of the biggest problems with these machines is going through and reheadering them. It's a sizable amount of work, and if you do it wrong, you've ruined something. If you don't know what you're doing, ask somebody that does, or, you know.
The headers are soldered to the board.
These are soldered to the board, and so these headers are what's known as IDC, or insulation displacement connectors. When they made them, there's a fork in the actual header, and they shove the wire down in that, which cuts through the insulation and gets the wire touching this fork.
Very, very much
now
like
you
a
do
trailer
this
splice.
and this. Yeah. It's cutting. It was designed to cut through insulation. Well, eventually it also starts cutting through the wire. And on a lot of these, this one in particular, you can come up and look at this in a minute, but it's going literally like this, in and back out into the rest of the system. So now you've got this thing, it's gonna do this, and it's gonna scissor that wire in half. I don't know how many times I've gone, okay, checking, oh, that's half of the wire, and the other half's still down there. And now I'm gonna have to splice this, put another, But they did this because they could manufacture them on an assembly line very quickly. And as he said, 90 days, they don't care. Once it's made its money, they're done. The manufacturer makes just about no money on selling you one of those headers. So they didn't want to. They got to sell you a coffin to make any money.
We have a question from our online audience.
Shoot.
Okay, I recently bought my first pin, a Joker's. As I'm cleaning it up, I'm finding bulb and entire sockets and wiring missing. Tracing them back to the boards, it looks like some of the wires from the Molex were cut. Where should I start? Do I try first to rebuild the connectors on the interconnect board? Is it easier to replace that board entirely? Not quite sure how to know if it can be saved. The missing sockets and bulbs are a mix of feature and GI, mostly GI. None of the illumination works. Thank you very much for listening to my question.
Well, anything can be saved. It's just how deep do you want to get into it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Joker's is a Gottlieb, is that correct? Is that right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Joker poker. If it is in fact a Gottlieb, your best place to go is Steve Young's Pinball Resource. They own all the rights to all the Gottlieb stuff, and unfortunately, since he did buy the rights, he's kind of a Nazi about the manuals. You have to buy them from him, otherwise you can't get them. He won't let anybody post them online.
Joker's is a Williams System 11B.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that one. Thank you.
We can only remember so much when you've got so much.
Being it's a Williams System 11B, that's very repairable. It's unless it caught on fire, yeah.
Okay,
you
so
can fix that.
with anything like this, you start at the headers. With the power off, you can pull your header. Looking at the connector, is any of it brown? Is it any of it brittle? Does anything look like it's missing? Now there should be a key pin on these. That is supposed to be missing. This is your first step. You can look to see if one is overheated. It will be very common for the connector to have gotten discolored. If it's discolored, you need to replace it.
On the particular Jokers, with your manual, in the manual, in the back there is an interconnect diagram. And the interconnect diagram will tell you what goes from each header to each other header or where it actually goes, if it goes to a lamp socket or what. It's in the back of the manual.
So you can rewire that. You know, if you've got a socket missing for, you know, in this case, Venus. The socket's been missing for whatever reason. Probably it was just oxidized. They replaced it. They took it out and didn't finish the job. So you'd go there, okay. You look in the manual. This is where this stuff comes up. You say, okay, lamp number 45. All right, you look at that. Look at the schematic diagram. It's going to show you the lamp matrix if it's a feature lamp. And it'll show you this wire and this diode controlled lamp number 45. You've got one side that's shared amongst the row and one that's shared amongst the column. If they've done, without seeing the machine, it's hard to say for sure just what they've done, but if they've like ripped out an entire column, you go back, it'll tell you at the top of the matrix which header and which pin that should have been.
We will cover that in the lamp matrix that we're going to go into next, but there's also going to be a drawing in your manual, just like the lamps one that we have for Bad Cats, that'll tell you everywhere that you should have a feature lamp, and it'll call it out. So if they pulled lamps and they were in the bottom of the cabinet or they were hanging or whatever, that drawing there in connection with your interconnect drawing should match up to tell you where the hanging stuff or the stuff in the bottom of the cabinet actually used to belong. Does that answer kind of what you were asking on the jokers?
You've got a project, guaranteed. This is a project.
Are those headers and the connectors that plug into them typically Molex products?
These are all Molex 156s. The ones we get nowadays tend to be black.
And square as opposed
and
to
squares. Round. Yeah, so one thing, they used round pins in these, which you have a round pin and you have a wiper. So you got this little tiny contact patch. You'd use the modern ones, they're a square pin, so you're doing this to a wiper. And then we tend to replace these with what are known as trifuricon pins. So they're actually U-shaped. There's the wiper that was normally there, and then two sides. So now you're connecting a square pin on 3 areas. You're going to last probably the lifetime of the machine if you go through and completely replace them. Now, if you repin this header and you don't change the pins on the actual PCB, you're going to be just asking for your problems a little bit later. It will work for a while. We won't warranty that work. If you replace just the pins on the PCB, you don't replace the pins in the headers, same deal. These things have worn little grooves or little burn spots on the actual headers and the connectors. Anybody, I don't know how many times I've heard, well, I reseated it and it worked. I'm like, yeah, okay for now.
Did we actually answer your question, or did we get sidetracked? And it happens to us sometimes, so I want to touch base and make sure that
your relays, so.
Right, well, it sounds like I need to check. The relay is probably fine. I need to make sure that I don't have a problem with the wire. I need to make sure that the interconnect from the upper to the lower.
Yeah, so.
The connector to the controller board itself that drives the relay.
Yes.
So your relay could have a burned contact internally, but you can replace the relay with a multimeter, jam the leads into the, well, it depends. Depending on the unit, if the relay is soldered to the board, it's a little harder to do. Some of the earlier Williams, if it's got, where it's got pins on it, you can pull that relay, put in the leads from a multimeter.
What I don't have is any measure of what the relay part is. I don't have that listed anywhere.
Okay, are we talking about a board that's about this big?
It's actually a relay, a little block relay that's
it's the ice cube.
Straight into the.
It's an ice cube.
Okay, it's
the Williams ice cube.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, everybody calls them the Williams ice cube because they're blue covered usually.
Blue or yellow.
Yeah, somebody's got those. Who Go up and talk to Marco.
Sure.
He'll be able to tell you if he doesn't have them.
He should
He,
know.
he
who
should
does.
have, or definitely will know who. But your relay is probably okay. Making sure you've got control signals into the relay working correctly is your first step.
Yeah.
But then you're going back to, if you're not getting those control signals well, going back up, the relays are run as solenoids. So you're looking at the solenoid matrix in almost every case.
And we're going to cover that today too.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're busy guys.
Yeah.
Friday, it's the Friday show for Dave and Doc. David. My name's David.
About 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're into the Matrix this year.
But once you know, yes or no, you've got signal at the relay, then bypass everything else, go up to where it is at the board, and check you're getting it there. This is all meter work. Standard multimeter you can get at Radio Shack will do what you need. Once you know either end, then you can start looking for failures. Sometimes there's interconnects. I know on like my Black Knight, one of the joys of with the older pins is you take the head off and you've got all the connectors going to the boards, but then you've got a whole series of these connectors connecting the head to the coffin. And then under that, you've got more connectors. So yeah, joy, joy, joy.
Yeah, I found that the connectors on the circuit boards themselves and the headers are just unbelievably stiff.
Stiff is,
I've got kind of plastic that holds the other piece
Yeah.
in, and so I've actually like cut my hand getting it loose.
yep.
It finally gave way.
Yeah, not the first time I've done that.
So
Yeah.
is there a newer
The newer connectors, well,
if I replace them all?
if you go through and replace them with the square pins and the new trifuricons, they're not as stiff. These IDCs, they always, well, they want them to hold.
The IDCs do get brittle,
Yeah.
and when they get stiff, like you're talking about, they,
More of the ones that are the point, the 0.156.
yeah, point one.
Yeah.
Those ones where it's just the single row.
Yeah, these.
Higher amperage.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they're extremely stiff, are they the locking ramp type? If they're the locking ramp type, you can actually file down the locking ramp a little bit, and that makes them not as stiff.
I'm not sure how to describe what it does. I mean, it has a little side piece that comes up.
Yeah.
That's the locking ramp.
Yeah, there's that.
That's
and
a locking
it-
ramp.
You know, part of it is, you know, trying to even disconnect them. The board isn't terribly well supported and it flexes while I'm trying to pull it.
Yes.
Take a Dremel with the sanding drum, and it takes about 30 seconds. You just sand that down smooth. Or you can buy the ones without the locking ramp, and you won't have that problem.
On the
Yeah.
connector. Once
Yeah.
After I get it off, which is the hard part.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do, as long as you have the power off, is you can take a like a scribe or a what we refer to as a tweaker. It's this very small screwdriver, and you can actually pry in between the pins to help get that off.
You can come in to the back and give it a little bit of a nudge, or
Yeah.
put the screwdriver in and twist just a little.
Yeah, that will not damage the board. Well, it should not damage the board.
Now, one thing you may be having a problem with, as you're talking about when you flex the board a bit, if everything seems okay, but you wiggle things a little bit, and oh, that worked, that didn't, you've probably got cracked solder joints in the back of the board. Pulling the board
that's
off,
also common on the back of these headers.
real common on these headers.
I've been doing a bunch of other work, like in the display
Mm-hmm.
boards. I have some flickering going on there.
Sure.
And I have a desolder and a microscope, and I've looked and seen that, you know, the pins are completely missing the solder.
Yeah.
Some of those pins before I go and replace them.
Yeah.
So it's like luck that it was still connected somewhere internally.
Oh, sure.
It was interesting seeing
yeah.
how extremely
Weak
they
it is.
had changed.
Oh, yeah.
I recently had a board I was looking at for someone. Resistors on the driver board had fallen off the board because the solder had gotten so hot, it liquefied, and this big
System 7
3 amp
Hyperball, 3-watt resistor,
fell off the board.
several of them.
And like-
And it was not uncommon.
And I went to look at it, I'm like, wait, there's a part missing. Oh, there it is. What the? That shouldn't happen. More questions, more anything.
Okay, I think we're going to slide on.
Okay.
We
Right,
need
this
a
is
couple
our-
minutes because we need to bring over the other, we'll have both
The
of
other
those.
chart, yeah.
There's two of them.
The other one up there.